Okay. So this leads us to thesis number 73. If a law is unjust and not workable, we should not keep it on the books and become hypocrites and lawbreakers, but we should change the law to reflect the will of the majority. Okay, number 74. The Second Amendment is to be upheld as written in the Constitution. Now, there's a lot of disagreement on the Second Amendment. A lot of people want us to register all of our guns or not have any guns. A large segment of our society are big on the Second Amendment, and they want us to maintain the right to keep and bear arms. But no matter what you believe on this, if you believe in the Constitution, then we should adhere to what is written in the Constitution, even if we do not accept it line by line. If we don't like the Constitution, the way it's written, then we should seek to change it. But it's pretty clear in there. Now, even though it's pretty clear when you read it, it's amazing how people can look at the Second Amendment and change the meaning. Let me read you the way the Second Amendment is currently written. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's pretty clear, right? Well, on the other hand, people that don't like the Second Amendment will read this and say, well, this just pertains to a militia. A militia has the right to keep and bear arms, not the people. Well, you know, that's not the way it reads. Matter of fact, when the Second Amendment was sent to the states, they altered it just a little bit, and this was to clarify this. When they first wrote it, the word people was not capitalized. But when they sent it to the states to be accepted, the word people was capitalized, and the reason they did that was to emphasize the fact that it was the people that had the right to keep and bear arms and not the militia. And among the people, our founding fathers, when you read all that they had to say about the right to keep and bear arms, there's nothing in there at all to indicate that they wanted to limit that to militia. What they're saying here was that because a militia is necessary at times, because we're going to have to gather forces together to be able to defend ourselves, it's important that the people have the right to keep and bear arms. Because if the people have the right to keep and bear arms, this means that they're going to be prepared. This means that the government can just create a standing army from the citizens themselves, almost at the drop of a hat, because especially when shortly after our country was founded, almost everybody were armed. So the government could create a standing army very quickly from the citizens themselves. Matter of fact, this was one of the great advantages the South had over the North. Even though they had a lot fewer people from which to raise an army, almost everybody in the South knew how to shoot, and a lot of people in the North didn't. And a lot of people in the North had to be trained. This is why the South was so hard to conquer, even though the North had a lot more people and had a lot more resources. In the South, everybody was armed and everybody knew how to shoot, and they could call on any family and pull people out of that family, and they knew how to handle a gun. And that's what made the South so difficult to conquer. If all things were equal, the South should have been a lot easier to subdue than they were, but they were turned out to be a very, very difficult people to overpower, even though the cause of the North was just in many ways, especially concerning slavery. the fact that the South was armed as well as they were made them very difficult to subdue. So this was the reason, because it may be essential to create militias. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's pretty clear, and you really have to almost consciously subvert this to get any other meaning out of it. Now, like I say, there's a lot of disagreements over this, and what the people should do if you disagree with the Second Amendment, seek to change it rather than to distort the meaning. Let's not distort the meaning of our laws. Let's look at our laws the way they are, the way they're meant to be read, and go with it. And if we don't like it, then we change it. But let's just not give it some esoteric meaning and try to change it in the courts contrary to what is written. And this is the point I think the majority will go along with, is that if we don't like something, let's change it rather than interpret it esoterically. If a jury, this is number 75, if a jury or judge concludes a lawsuit is frivolous, the plaintiff must pay all expenses to the defendant. Now this is another one that's important legally, because one of the things that costs us a lot of money in our legal system is frivolous lawsuits. So if the frivolous lawsuit comes forward and the guy that's making the frivolous lawsuit has to pay the expenses, if he loses, then we'll have a lot fewer frivolous lawsuits. Number 75. Excuse me, but number 76. We must make sure that only citizens of the United States are allowed to vote in the elections. Well, we're getting more and more danger of, because of all the illegal immigrants we have in our country today, that there's people who just like to take busloads of them down to the voting booth and have them vote without having to show any ID of any kind. And this is a concern that many people have, and we need to make sure that this doesn't happen. I don't know why some people are really adverse to people showing ID when they register to vote, because if a policeman stops me, I have to show him ID just to show him that I can drive. Now, if I have to show a policeman ID when he stops me for speeding, what's so bad about having to show ID when you go to vote for people that are going to be over us and be able to make laws and tell us what to do? I'd say it's pretty important that they be elected legally. Number 77. The U.S. Census should not count anyone as a citizen who is not a citizen of the United States. If non-citizens are counted, they are to be tabulated as such. Now, this is one of the problems we had with the census, was that a lot of people felt that illegal aliens would be counted as citizens, and the advantage of them doing that would be in creating voting blocks for the distribution, or blocks for the distribution of federal funds. So the census determines how federal funds are going to be distributed to different areas. So it's important in the census that we have a proper count of U.S. citizens. 78. A child born in the United States to illegal immigrants should not be granted automatic citizenship. This is an important one, because the fact that two illegal aliens can come here, have a child, and then their child becomes a citizen that cannot be deported, and also receives benefits. This just gives more impetus for more illegal aliens to come in, especially pregnant ones. And if they're pregnant, then they incur a lot more costs on our health system, make all of our health premiums a lot higher, because it costs money to come here, go into a hospital, have a baby, and if the illegals don't have money to pay the hospital, which they rarely do, then this makes everybody's hospital bill higher. And there's all kinds of negative repercussions around this. And so this is something that we should change, and the majority of the people would accept. Okay, now we're going into morality, and I've only got one major moral point to cover in this thesis. A lot of people, this is where a lot of people going contrary to the majority is in their moral points, but there is one important moral point, and that the majority is really behind, and it's around the area of abortion, but not abortion per se. I think the major issue of abortion should be put to a referendum to the people, because it's so controversial we should leave it to them. But this particular point, the majority, all surveys and polls show the majority support this thesis number 79. Late-term abortions should be illegal except where the life of the mother or another life in the womb is at risk. And, you know, even the most hardcore atheist or the most hardcore right-to-choose person will cringe when they think of aborting, say, a fetus that's 7 or 8 months developed. And so if you're into the right to choose, even people that support the woman's right to have an abortion cringe at this particular thought. So this is a moral issue that the majority is definitely behind, yet it's amazing how many of our politicians go ahead and support the idea of late-term abortions. And got one more I'll cover just really briefly. Extremely controversial items such as abortion, general abortion, gay marriage, and the like should be settled by a popular vote of the people. Let the majority rule. So there are certain items that are very controversial, abortion and different parts of gun rights, and these controversial items, instead of leaving them to our representatives that are not representing us well, we should leave it to the people. Let the people decide on these very controversial items, and on something very controversial, we'll find that close to half the people are going to be unhappy with the results, but you know, that's just the way it is. But we shouldn't let a small minority of the people decide on these extremely controversial items. We should get the people involved and let them participate in the power of decision on these extremely controversial items. Okay, we hope to be able to wrap up these 95 theses next week, and we'll be talking to you then. Thank you.